What does the oldest theater in Birmingham have in common with the Marx Brothers, Buster Keaton, the adult film Deep Throat, and even Arnold Schwarzenegger? Learn all about the wild history of the Lyric Theater. The Gilded Age was the golden age for American theater. During this time, Birmingham was the second city after New York to show talking pictures. In the early 1900s, Birmingham experienced a dramatic increase in population, and as a result, dozens of theaters began to spring up in the decades to come. 2nd and 3rd Avenue North were the center of Birmingham's theater district and became home to many theaters such as the Majestic, the Ritz, and the Lyric Theater, to name a few. Of all the theaters to operate in downtown Birmingham over the years, only 3 remain: the Carver, the Alabama, and the Lyric Theater. Real estate developer Lewis V. Clark purchased 3 adjoining lots on 3rd Avenue North, and construction began in 1912, with plans to open that year. However, that ultimately did not happen. Instead, opening day would be January of 1914. Lyric was arguably one of the finest theaters in the city. It was the first to adopt an artificial cooling system by using fans to blow air over 2 tons of ice, which were stored under the stage and blown directly towards the guest. In its early years, the Lyric hosted soon-to-be famous entertainers such as the Marx Brothers, Mae West, and Buster Keaton. Admission was considered low even for the time, ranging from 25 cents to 75 cents, depending on the show.
The Lyric is a lot different than the Alabama Theater, which was built as a movie theater. The Lyric was built for vaudeville. What is vaudeville? The word vaudeville, I believe this is correct, means voice of the city. Back in the old days, you had people in the streets, jugglers and musicians and actors and mimes. Somebody got the great idea that, hey, we'll take some of these acts and we'll put them on stage and charge admission, and people can see these acts as many as they want over and over again. That was vaudeville. And actually, on into early television, that was vaudeville. If you think about the Ed Sullivan Show or any of those early programs, Red Skelton, they were basically skits of 2 or 3 people doing comedy or opera or who knows what. And that's exactly what vaudeville was.
In the days of segregation, the Lyric was one of the first theater venues in which African American guests and white guests could attend the same show and pay the same admission price, although they sat in separate sections. White guests entered on the 3rd Avenue side, and African American guests entered around the corner on 18th Street North and proceeded to the upper balcony to an area reserved to them.
This is one of the most remarkable and compelling, to me, compelling spaces, not just in the Lyric, but really in Birmingham and in the United States. If you look at the floor on that side, it's terrazzo. So now terrazzo is still considered pretty fancy flooring, but it's not as fancy as the marble. During segregation, all the theaters on 2nd and 3rd were white theaters. All the theaters on 4th were black theaters, right? So they were segregated spaces. The Alabama, again, was white audiences only until 1963. The Lyric was one of the first and one of the only theaters where black and white audiences saw the same show at the same time for the same price, but it was wholly segregated.
The Lyric was the last theater constructed specifically for live performances, mainly vaudeville, in Birmingham. Unfortunately, the opening of the Lyric led to the demise of the Majestic next door.
So this is one of my favorite views in the whole place. I mean, there are a lot of views. There are a lot of seats in here that I love, but this one is really special. So this room is really shaped like a speaker. It's shaped like the bell of a horn. It was built to what, later came to be known and came to be understood as like a Broadway standard in terms of not just the acoustics, but your distance from actors. So you want to be able to if somebody is doing a stage play, you want to be able to see the expression, the emotion on their face. And so here you are incredibly, even if you're in the balcony, right, you're incredibly close to the action.
Approximately 30 feet above the stage rests a mural and was painted in 1913 while the theater was still under construction by a local artist named Harry Hawkins.
That mural has been there since 1913. It's called The Allegory of the Muses. It is several pieces of canvas, and it was tacked to the wall, like a gazillion teeny tiny tacks.
And if you look at that painting, you'll see that there are several females, scantily dressed, I might add, who are the muses. And they're following a guy who's holding a lyre. And the word lyre, actually the word lyric, comes from the word lyre. And so that's what that mural is all about.
Despite early success, the theater eventually began to struggle when the Ritz Theater, equipped with true air conditioning, opened its doors in 1926. As the Great Depression worsened after 1929, audiences were less and less able to pay for live performances. That, coupled with growing competition from radio and television, the Lyric and other theaters suffered major setbacks as audiences shrank. In 1931, the Lyric closed its doors as a vaudeville theater and reopened in April of 1932, strictly as a movie house.
As vaudeville was ending, so was the life of the Lyric. And by 1960, the Lyric was strictly a second-run movie house. Movies would play at the Alabama. You could see it for 50 cents. You could wait a month and come over to the Lyric and see the same picture for 10 cents. This place is a vaudeville theater. It's wide instead of deep, and it's just not meant for movies. They had to put up a screen so wide that they took the opera boxes down. At one point, I understand they had to lean the screen backwards because the projector was up so high that it was skewing the picture, and to get that straight, they had to lean the screen. So it was a terrible movie house, and the Lyric's first life ended in about 1960 when it closed.
Soon, the novelty of showing nothing but classic movies lost its popularity, and once again, the Lyric Theater faced an uncertain future. The theater was then rebranded as Foxy Adult Cinema and later as the Roxy Adult Cinema. This questionable reincarnation remained open until the early 1980s, at which time the building lay unused and became a shell of what it once was.
There's a legendary story of this being the only theater in Birmingham where they showed Deep Throat. And the projectionist was arrested.
Afterwards?
Well, it had been playing for 10 days. You know, this bit about the projectionist being arrested, we weren't sure if that had actually happened, or again, it was one of these things that had like hardened into history, right?
Sure.
Because it makes a good story. But I was giving a talk about the history of the Lyric at the Birmingham Country Club, and a woman, she said she had actually been on the jury when that projectionist.
Do we know his name?
I'm sure I have it written down. I don't have it, but it was remarkable to have it, you know, these
Sure.
sort of wild,
witness.
yeah, a literal witness, and to have these wild parts of the story verified.
As we walked past the former fire escape doors, I learned about a little movie history fact.
So it was a really unusual X-shaped fire escape.
Yes.
It was kind of great looking, and you know, at that point, that was Arnold Schwarzenegger's first feature film.
Okay.
And only his second film, period. You know, he was not a superstar. In fact, he's not even in the center, like on the array. He is, you know, up on the right side if you're facing it, like second from the middle in golden skivvies. And when we were first, you know, it's like an iconic picture.
Yes.
And that movie is a cult favorite, to say the least. It's quite, like, Jeff Bridges is in it and Sally Field.
That's correct, yeah.
And it's quite ridiculous. At some point it features Arnold playing the fiddle at a hoedown. It's quite
I've seen a few clips, yes.
Yeah, it's quite a thing.
In the 1980s, the company permanently ceased its operation as a movie theater, and it became a shell of what was once a majestic theater.
About 60 women in Birmingham decided they wanted to bring the Lyric back. And they brought in an architect from Nashville who took a look at the Lyric, and he basically told them, this is a lost cause. Don't do this. So they decided at that time to shutter the doors, and they did. And the Lyric basically was tucked away in the building and forgotten about. They took part of it, the lobby, and also the back part where the soundboard is now, and walled that in. There was a voodoo shop back where the soundboard is at one point. A ladies' beauty supply store was in the lobby. And then eventually those closed. So the Lyric was empty and stayed empty until we finally broke through the brick walls and found what seemed to be King Tut's tomb in here when we looked at it. What a great discovery.
In 1993, the theater was purchased by Birmingham Landmarks, Inc.
The Lyric was in decay when we got it. Obviously, it'd been here for nearly 60 years since any performances had been made, with the exception of 1 or 2 years when it was a movie theater in the early 70s and 80s. One of the things that is most stunning about the Lyric, and you can see those behind me, are the opera boxes. They're plaster. In fact, all of the ornate work that you see in the Lyric is not plastic or carved wood, it's all plaster. Luckily, we had a photograph from the Birmingham Age back in the early 1900s when the Lyric was being built, and it showed one side of the auditorium, and there were the opera boxes. So we used that as the blueprint for rebuilding these opera boxes, and they've been a phenomenal hit. When people walk in, that's the first thing they see and the first thing they comment about.
On January the 14th, 2016, the Lyric opened its doors once again, exactly 102 years after her original opening.
You know, sometimes when I have given tours coming down this way, I make my friends, or that are like act like they have horse blinders. Like, don't close your eyes because you need to see. But it's quite thrilling if you don't let yourself look up until we are almost to the stage.
So you don't want me to look?
Nope, don't look.
Okay, I'm not gonna look.
Like I said, keep your eyes open. But then we'll get down here and turn around, come this way.
Okay.
And now, turn around and take that in. What do you think?
It is majestic. Wow. It is beautiful.
The Marx Brothers performed here, man. Like in the early days. Sophie Tucker, Mae West, Buster Keaton when he was still like young and performing with his family.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So Buster Keaton was here, the Marx Brothers. Mm-hmm. That is amazing.
Yeah, Milton Berle performed here as a young stand-up comedian.
And in fact, he stood right here where I'm standing, looked out in the audience on the left side and said, my mom sat right out here when I was at the Lyric, and she was a heckler as part of my act. And he said this was one of the most beautiful theaters in existence back in 1927. It looked like an ancient European theater. And he said it was such a shock because most of the theaters in the South at that time, he said, were like barns.
Like a phoenix rising up through the ashes, the resilient Lyric Theater has finally come full circle. She's once again a brilliant showpiece of architecture and remarkable craftsmanship. All are welcome through her doors. A place to come together with family and friends and once again, be entertained.